Good afternoon, everyone. You're welcome to this webinar dedicated to DVB-CI Plus latest updates. While people are still connecting, before getting into the substance of the topic, I'd like to tell you that last month we had a webinar mini-series on targeted advertising that you can now watch on the DVB website. This series consists of two parts. The first one is dedicated to the business case and how essential it is for the industry, especially today. And the second part is more on the implementation side, and you'll see also some successful market stories. So you may want to have a look here. And now also, if I may just a final advertising, and you may think it's not targeted advertising because I know the audience today is more from a niche market. Indeed, people involved in CI Plus are quite often tied to specific pay TV markets. But on the contrary, I think that it's worth mentioning that you might be interested in getting some insights into the DVB new IP-centric solutions, and in particular, this native IP solution, because you might even not be aware actually that DVB has shifted its focus to a whole new direction to help the industry tackle a transition to hybrid and ultimately IP networks. So this mainly relies on DVB-I, the overall DVB-I package that you may or may not have heard about. And this new package will soon include a new essential block, which is this native IP solution. So just in a few words, this solution will enable the delivery of native IP streams, for instance, linear OTT services over broadcast means. So if you're curious to know what it is and why it's so important, then just please dial in next week, same day, same time, nearly same place. So now let's go back to the point. We are here to hear about DVB-CI Plus new features, and especially the 2.0 and the new USB formats and the benefits that go along with that. So I'm pleased to welcome our expert, Nicolas Frame. So Nicolas is a standardization manager at DP Vision, and as such, he not only contributes to the development of the standards, but he also gets involved with technical and the commercial teams in his company to integrate those standards in TV products. And Nicolas is also the chair of the technical group in charge of DVB-CI Plus. So welcome, Nicolas. Thank you very much for your kind collaboration for the preparation of this webinar. And before I leave the floor, I would like to just remind the audience that we are live today, so you have the opportunity to ask questions. And to do so, just use the question box at the bottom of your screen, not the chat box. And we'll deal with them either at the very end of the session or maybe also during Nicolas' presentation when relevant between the various sections. So please post questions as we go along. So with all that said, Nicolas, now the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So welcome, everyone. So here are the topics we'll be discussing today. We'll start with a quick recap of the different CI Plus specifications, because there are quite a few now, and just to show what they are and where DVB's role is. We'll then look at the latest 1.4 features in a bit more detail. Following that, we'll look at the advantages of DVB-CI Plus 2.0, followed by a closer technical look. And then we'll wrap up with some ecosystem updates, what's been happening and what will be happening in the coming months. And then, of course, we'll answer any remaining questions you might have. So first of all, the different specifications. So it all started 1997, the Senelec EN 50221, common interface with the PCMCA physical layer. DVB then added some CI Plus, CI extensions, TS 101699, with things like application MMI, still used today. CI Plus was developed on top of that, adding important protections for content descrambled between the CAM and the host then. And that was evolved until version 1.3.2, where control was handed back to DVB for development of the CI Plus 1.4 standard that was published as TS 103.205. And the latest version of that is 1.4.1 that we'll be discussing in a moment. In addition to those documents, those standards, you also have a couple of blue books. There was Blue Book A173-2 or Part 2. This contains some important extensions, for example, URI version 4, output control. So very important features that are still referenced today and used widely. And so you'll still see references to this blue book, this standalone blue book. However, moving forwards, this has been merged into TS 103.205 to make the maintenance of specifications easier and to reduce the number of specifications people have to look at going forwards. Now, part 1 of that blue book was published as the second generation common interface, so CI Plus 2.0 as TS 103.605. So there we have the technical specifications for CI and CI Plus. In addition to those technical specifications, you also have what we tend to refer to as wrapper specs, published by CI Plus LLP. So these are not defining new features, they're mainly profiling those existing specifications. And so here is the first one of those is the mandatory 1.4.3. So any CI Plus device must comply with this profile, this wrapper specification. In addition, there are a couple of optional wrapper specifications profiles that devices can choose to support. One for the USB interface and one for the ECP security level. And again, just to be clear, these are not defining new technical specification. They're simply profiling existing specs. So to give another example, ECP refers to the URI version 5 defined in TS 103.205. In addition to those, there's some other documents that licensees, CI Plus licensees will be familiar with, but are worth mentioning. There's the license agreement, which beyond being a legal agreement also contains important technical information on robustness and compliance, how content should be handled by a host, what protections, how it can be output and processed and so on. The licensee specification contains important secrets for the implementation of CI Plus in production devices. And the change notices, of course, are important as they will convey information on changes affecting product life cycles, such as the sunrise of new specifications and so on, as related to the testing and certification regime. So today we'll be looking at these two in more detail. And so as that slide showed you, it really is a joint effort between DVB and CI Plus LLP. DVB has ownership of the specifications and is developing those, 1.4 and 2.0. And the LLP is helping bring it to market as the trust authority, licensing the secrets to the implementers, offering the device certification and testing regime, providing the credentials through their partner DigiCert, and working with content distributors to manage things like revocation, very important, as well as enforcing the compliance of the robustness rules and compliance rules and monitoring the market for fraudulent usage. You may have seen in the news not that long ago the results of this kind of activity in a successful court case against someone who had infringed these rules. So it's really a joint effort specifying and deploying CI Plus. But we're here to look at the DVB specifications in more detail. So we'll start with CI Plus 1.4 and the latest two features. So these are content control version 5 and overt watermarking. So content control. I'll put simply, content control resource enables a secure channel between the CAM and the host. So this secure channel is important because there's certain sensitive information that needs to be communicated between the two devices related to the descrambling of content and how that content is to be handled by the host, retention limits, outputs, allowed outputs, and so on. And so this was a logical choice for overt watermarking. Now, up until CC version 4, the version of the resource basically determined what features you support as a device. With each new version, new mandatory features were added, pretty much. And so with overt watermarking, it's something that's not relevant for all devices because it's really dependent on the market and the operator. And so we wanted to make it optional. And so to avoid the problem with the current way of working with resource versions, a new feature for negotiating optional features was added. And so how does this work? Well, when you connect a CAM to a host, there's a whole sequence of events that is started, or the authentication, the setup of this secure authenticated channel, negotiation of the URI version. And so now there's this new step for a CAM and host that both support CC version 5. The CAM can request to the host to indicate what are the optional features that it supports. And so when it receives that request, the host will reply with a bit mask, so 32 bits. Each of those can be allocated to an optional feature. And now the bit 0 is allocated to overt watermarking. So if a host replies with that bit set to 1, the CAM knows that it can start making use of the overt watermarking feature. So speaking of overt watermarking, let's move on to that. So overt watermarking, or covert watermarking for that matter, it's very simply put, it's embedding data in audio or video for various purposes, but in the context of CI Plus, that is probably to track the origin of content for copyright protection purposes, such as knowing which subscriber descrambled the content. Now, watermark insertion was possible even from the first release of CI Plus 1.4, so the first version of TS 103.205. But what's new now is the fact that this is done by the host. So the CAM informs the host of the information that it needs to overlay on top of the video. And so that's the new part in this latest specification. So let's just see how that works. So if we look at the different layers of UI and video, so you typically have the video layer of a scrambled channel. And the host is required to show the overt watermarks, this string of characters, on top of this video layer, directly on top. This will be shown below the subtitles layer not to impact accessibility. And typically, you may also have an application layer and a host UI graphics plane. That's purely for informative purposes, but the standard is specific as to the requirement of the overt watermark in relation to the video and the subtitles. So now let's get into an example. So say a host tunes to a scrambled channel and informs the SciCam starts descrambling. Then through some trigger, so it may be something communicated via the CAS, but that's outside the scope of CI Plus. But through some trigger, the CAM decides it wants to show a watermark on top of this scrambled channel. So to do so, it will send a set of watermark instructions to the host over this secure channel. These instructions are paired with the local transport stream ID and the program number, so that they are unambiguously paired with the content. So the host knows exactly what service it needs to show these on top of. So a host will process those instructions, display the resulting watermark, and provide confirmation that it has been rendered to the CAM. Now, as I mentioned, things can be shown on top of the watermark by the host. If this happens, there might be some kind of options menu or something. At that time, especially with modern hosts, it's probably not an issue. It can show it on top and keep the watermark shown. But because it's obscuring the video and the watermark, it is allowed temporarily for the host to remove the watermark at that time, if that's an implementation concern for the host. Of course, when the menu is removed, the watermark must absolutely be shown. Now let's look at some other examples. So let's say the CAM wants to update the watermark. Well, it will just send a set of new instructions. The host will process them and update the watermark shown on screen. The CAM can also request that the host remove the watermark. That's simply a watermark off instruction with no associated parameters. When the host receives this, it will remove the watermark and inform the CAM. And finally, if the CAM wants to display the same watermark again, well, there's no concept of caching. This is to avoid any confusion as to what watermark data to use. So simply the CAM will just send the same instructions again to the host, and the same watermark will be shown. But for the host, from a host perspective, this is just a new watermark. And on channel change, the watermark is always removed. The CAM would need to request that a watermark be shown once more after channel change. So to recap, the overt watermark is a secure protocol to display a line of text over a scrambled service. It's designed to be as simple and as lightweight as possible, as you might have seen. So it's very, very simple. what can be controlled, well, basically the text itself, so that's printable ASCII, the position, size, color, and transparency. Of course, this is communicated over the SAC, so it's secured, but it's important that it would be simple as lightweight as possible to encourage adoption in the market. It can be used with broadcast content, of course, but also IP-delivered content using the mechanisms in CI Plus for that, so host control and SciCam player. As I mentioned, the host provides confirmation to the CAM that the watermark has been rendered. If it would not do so, or if it would inform the CAM that it has not rendered the watermark, then the CAM can take a decision as to whether or not the service should continue to be descrambled. For time shift and PVR, the spec also covers these use cases to ensure they cannot be used to avoid showing the watermark. So that is, let's say, a summary of the overt watermarking feature. And so after this, we will move on to the next topic, unless...
Nicolas?
Yes.
Maybe we have two questions that we rather handle now before moving to the 2.0 advantages. Someone is asking, will Simulcast be extended to provide triggering for overt watermarking?
That's an interesting question. So as part of the testing, I think that's not really under the, let's say, under the scope of us here. But let's say, and indeed, there's more information on this later, or let's say brief information. Obviously, there will be a testing. This will become part of the testing regime, and so all the necessary signaling and streams and so on will be provided for that. So I imagine indeed that will be part of that. Okay,
thank you. And there's a second one also, which is someone wonders whether the host will notify the CAM about the HDCP version.
So in fact, it's rather the other way around. The CAM via the URI can inform the host as to what HDCP, what protection on the outputs must be employed in order to output the content. So if you, in the case of ECP, with URI version 5, the CAM can restrict output to HDCP 2.2 content type 1. So really enforcing the use of HDCP 2.2 or higher without possibility of downgrading. So it is possible to use the highest level of security for output with content, yes.
Okay, very clear. Now let's move on. Thank you, Nicolas.
Okay, well, thank you for the questions, and please don't hesitate to add more. Okay, so moving on to CI Plus 2.0 now. So we'll start with going through some of the benefits of this standard, because it might not be immediately clear, why moving to a new interface is of any significant benefit. So the first point to insist upon is that we're not starting from scratch. This is not a completely new standard. This builds upon the existing CI Plus 1.4 features and the security level. So there's no loss of features or security by moving to USB. So you get the additional benefits of this modern interface without losing anything. Furthermore, to reassure operators, there is no change to the broadcast signal or signaling, so it does not impact that at all. And from an implementation or device implementer side of things, there's a lot of synergy possible between the two, so that you can use a common implementation that addresses both interfaces, and you'll see that more in detail when we look at the technical details. But it's not that as if you need two separate implementations or two separate stacks for both interfaces. And of course, by moving to USB, it's future-proof. So this opens up a lot more possibilities, fewer bandwidth restrictions, improved IP connectivity, and of course some interesting synergies like with multi-stream. There's some commonality between the two. USB 3 supports native streams concept that can be used to map multi-stream CI Plus. So there's a lot of interesting things thanks to USB, and of course this opens up a lot more possibilities for the future as well. Beyond that, of course, there is the form factor. So having USB stick, this is something that almost everyone has used. It's probably the most recognizable and most used interface in the world, USB Type A. So very easy and recognizable. Beyond that, it's of course a smaller and lighter device. So that's really a great thing for logistics, storage, shipping, and so on. And as I'm sure all of us have seen, it's incredibly customizable. So offers new branding and marketing opportunities. There's been incredibly creative USB stick designs out there, so this really opens up those possibilities. And of course, all the tooling and capabilities to produce that kind of form factor for mass storage today could be leveraged for USB cams as well, because it's the same form factor. Moving on, robustness is a really important issue. Of course, today we're constantly faced with issues related to this, bent pins and so on. Well, the move to CI Plus USB 2.0, no more bent pins, and it uses a proven connector that's incredibly robust over an immense amount of connection cycles. And of course, also with the move to cardless, that also takes away the issues caused by smart cards being inserted the wrong way around. So all of that together means fewer calls to service centers and fewer service interventions, whether it's from the operator side or from the manufacturer side. So a real benefit there. Of course, I mentioned manufacturing. There's widespread support for this. Reference design supporting many SOCs and platforms. So USB is really widely supported. And of course, the impact on the circuit board design and SSBs is significant, because this means we can finally remove the quite large PCMCA connector. And not only does that save space on circuit boards, it also saves space in the I/O panels as well, which this is still quite a cumbersome thing to include. Now, of course, these changes will not happen overnight. There will be a transition period, and that transition period will have to last for quite some time, most likely. But nevertheless, if we don't start, then we can't see this benefit, and so we certainly hope that this will be a benefit we will be able to enjoy sooner rather than later. Now, all those benefits lead to new opportunities and compelling new products. So USB is already CI Plus already offered some interesting benefits. Single remote control. You have this. You insert the cam into the TV. You just use the TV remote control to access your content. You could manage the channel list. So as an operator, you could have the channel list installed in a very simple way using operator profile. You could access the latest premium content, UHD, HDR, live sports. But now, on top of all of that, using other standards such as HBBTV op-amp, you can add the look and feel of the operator as well to this. So really becoming more and more like a virtual set-top box. And more than that, through the use of the auxiliary file system, this can be leveraged in both connected and non-connected use cases. So this can address all kinds of markets, all kinds of user situations. Of course, nowadays, power consumption is a hot topic. This is a significantly better solution than an external set-top box, because the power consumption is significantly less. And more than that as well, there's no extra cables or power supply and so on to manage. It takes up less space, so it's also a lot less hassle for the user as well. So I think looking at the old features that CI Plus supported for many years now, and the new features, including other standards like HBBTV op-amp, this now really creates a very compelling product offering that we hope to see more of in the coming months and years. Of course, the move to USB as well facilitates a wider deployment of CI Plus. It was already a worldwide standard, it's true, but PCMCA was really a hampering factor. And so with the move to USB, this opens up more possibilities and will facilitate further deployments. So with that said, let's have a closer look at the technical side of things, dive into 103.605. So second generation common interface, what changes? Well, it's actually the most interesting thing is what doesn't change. The application, resource, and session layers are the same. Now you'll note there is a little asterisk next to the word unchanged, so I will go into detail as to what that is, but for the vast majority of it, there is no change. So this is a great benefit to implementations, because existing implementations can be leveraged for both interfaces. But of course, the physical link and transport layers are impacted with this move from PCMCA to USB. So we've talked about the form factor already, Type A stick form factor. There are some dimensions to be taken into account, obviously, because these devices may be inserted next to each other or next to other stick devices. Yeah, if a cam is beyond a certain size, then it will be important to include a cable to be able to connect it with some distance from the port so that it doesn't obstruct other devices. It's based on the USB specs, so robust, widely implemented, and those, of course, specify things like the mechanical, electrical, device configuration and discovery. So all those details are part of USB. We don't need high speed. We don't need USB 3 for CI Plus. So USB 2.0 high speed is more than enough, but of course that is required. So below that is not good enough. But that's fine because USB, of course, 2.0 high speed is very common these days. In fact, it's more unusual to find devices without 2.0. Briefly, how USB works at a very high level. Effectively, data is transferred between the host and what we call device endpoints. And so for DVB-CI Plus, we need two pairs of endpoints for the command interface and for the media interface for sending and receiving data. In addition, there's an optional pair of endpoints for a networking interface that I'll go into a bit more detail about later on. But that's at a very high level how data is exchanged between a device and a USB host. So now to dive into a bit more detail about the command interface, it's still quite simple. So the transport layer from PCMCA is replaced with USB bulk transfer, simply. And commands are, well, effectively inside APDUs, so application protocol data units, which are encapsulated into SPDUs, session protocol data units, which are sent as a single bulk transfer. So very simple mapping. And of course, as I mentioned, because the session and application layers are unchanged, those definitions remain the same from previous CI Plus standards. Except there are a couple of changes. So because USB cams they're able to reset themselves, so they don't need to ask a host to be reset anymore. So there are a couple of APDUs that are impacted by this. Basically, the request CI cam reset is redundant, and a host will ignore the reset request status field after a cam upgrade because the USB cam can take care of that itself. And as well, USB hosts will all support at least 96 megabits per second, and so a host does not need to inform a cam of its supported data. In addition to these points, there's also network connectivity that changes. So LSC can be replaced with a new native USB solution. So the USB CDC-EEM, so Communications Device Class Ethernet Emulation Model, which is basically offering a virtual Ethernet port to the CAM. Now, this can replace LSC. However, and this is an interesting example of the interaction between the LLP wrapper specification and the DVB standard. To facilitate the transition from PCMCA to USB, this wrapper specification allowed the continued use of LSC. But of course, you can still implement the improved virtual Ethernet port if you would like. But today, as there are no common use cases for this yet, to facilitate this transition, reducing the burden on implementations, this exception was included in this wrapper specification. So basically, you get the benefits of facilitating the transition by reducing the burden, with the benefits of that future-proof interface and the option to improve that network connectivity going forwards. So now we've discussed the command interface, we can say a few words about the media interface. So again, USB bulk transfer is used to transfer the transport stream data, but it is not done packet by packet. So basically what happens is the host will group several transport stream packets together into a fragment. This fragment will be sent to the CAM, and the CAM can either send back a fragment of the same size, or it can split it into smaller fragments if it wants. These restrictions are in place for buffer management reasons. There is no change to the handling of the scrambled MPEG-TS data. Before the fragment is sent, though, there's also a fragment header that is sent that includes some metadata about the content. For broadcast, it's very simple. All the fields are set to 0, except for the local transport stream identifier. The other fields are relevant when transferring ISO BMFF samples. And so when the content is transferred, first you will have a transfer of the header as a single bulk transfer, followed by the transfer of the fragment corresponding to that header, also as a single bulk transfer. So that was a quick insight, still quite high level into the USB standard.
Thank you, Nicolas. And maybe we have 2 or 3 questions that would be worth also answering before we go to the ecosystem updates. Someone is asking why USB-A and not USB-C? This would be smaller and more future-proof. And this person thinks that tape R is turning one's back on progress. So what do you think?
Okay, that's an interesting perspective. I think there are several reasons for this. First of all, the form factor. So USB-C is great for small devices like a phone, but not so great for a large device like a TV or a set-top box. Well, set-top boxes, of course, are getting smaller, so maybe for those. But for a TV, not so much. It makes it even harder to find the connector behind the TV. And of course, it's because it's a smaller connector, it's harder to get it to insert the cable or the device into it. Furthermore, nothing prevents from using a Type A to Type C adapter. So this doesn't prevent from moving to Type C later on. So effectively, it's a combination of those 2 factors. I think nothing is. I mean, it doesn't close the door on the use of Type C in the future, but Type A is far more ubiquitous today in consumer electronic devices. And especially with the form factor of a TV, that's the case.
Okay, that's relevant. Thank you. And there's another one. So other question. So compared to CI Plus 1.4, what does 2.0 offers in terms of benefits on HBBTV operator app?
It's a fair question. In fact, from an LPAP perspective, it will work the same way because that relies upon CI Plus 1.4 features such as auxiliary file system or potentially other signaling, such as operator profile. So from that perspective, it will work the same for both form factors. It's just as I mentioned earlier, it's the combination of everything into this new form factor that can really change the perception of this of a CI, what is a CI Plus module in the face of consumers and operators as well. Well, in fact, of the whole industry. So you're moving away from this clunky device to this well-known appearance and form factor that includes these new features that are effectively arriving on the market around about the same time. And so that's really why it's just these features are being launched around about the same time, and so combining them creates an interesting way of perceiving this new type of product. But technically, the underlying features, CI Plus 2.0 won't handle OPAP any differently to 1.4.
Okay, so the advantage is more on the user side.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well-known form factor.
Yeah, usability and perception of the product offering. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And there's another question. I'm not sure how clear it will be for you, because someone is asking, how will this be CAS agnostic? So
that's actually quite easy to answer, because the CAS is anyway the CAS is something that the CAM will deal with. So the CAM will descramble CAS protected content and then re-encrypt it for transfer over the CI Plus interface. So anything CAS related, CI Plus is agnostic to that. So there's no dependency there. So in that sense, that's as CAS agnostic as CI Plus has always been.
Thank you very much. There's a comment I can just read from the box, which is, with due respect, I disagree. It is easier to use USB-C because it is orientation agnostic. You do not have to worry about the orientation. And as regards adapters, they tend to get lost. Please consider and change to USB-C if it's not too late. And I'm a TV reviewer and do speak for the consumers. But this is just a comment.
Absolutely, and believe me, it's an absolute fair point. The reversibility of Type C, I think most of us will have benefited from this in our daily lives with phones, and it is a godsend. It really is. But with a CAM, it's not something you'll be unplugging and plugging in regularly. In most cases, of course, there are people who might move between rooms if they only have one CAM. So typically it is something you connect once. And as I mentioned, with the form factor and how people are typically having to reach behind their TV to connect it, a smaller port actually does cause more issues connecting things than a larger Type A port. So it's a trade-off, and so it's an absolutely valid point. But yeah, there are other aspects to consider than just the reversibility of Type C. So I do get the point, but yeah, there are other things to take into account.
Yeah, sure.
Also, again, the fact that Type A is just so ubiquitous. So Type C is indeed really made inroads in many mobile devices, but in fixed devices, not so much at the moment. So, but like I said, the door is not closed. So because it's USB, and that's again one of the strengths of USB 4, the USB standard. We may see Type C used in the future.
In the future. Okay, thank you very much for the answers, and thanks to the audience for the comments and questions. And now let's move on the ecosystem updates, and we'll use with further questions at the end. Thank you. So
we'll start with just a quick summary of what's happened over the past few years, because it's interesting to look. In fact, a lot has happened. Starting back in 2017, we had finally had the sunrise of CI Plus 1.4, so the TS103.205 standard being deployed. A year after that, we had the launch of ECP, so designed to meet the Movie Labs requirements, so offering, being able to offer premium content, so live sports, UHD, HDR content through CI Plus. A bit later that year, also a big milestone, we had the ETSI publication finally of the second generation common interface, so the CI Plus 2.0 standard from DVB. The following year, so a year on from that, the LLP published the wrapper specification for that. So at that point, all of the specifications were available. And a bit earlier that same year, we had the CDA, a new CDA published. And why is that important? Well, it tackles a really important topic such as revocation, which is important for CI Plus and the trust that people need to have in CI Plus. Finally, two important parts of the puzzle. Last July and this May, so a few weeks back, the 2.0 certification regimes were launched for hosts and modules. And so now, of course, everything's in place for CI Plus 2.0 devices. And indeed, my own company, TP Vision, will be launching many of our Philips TVs this year with CI Plus USB support. But okay, that's all what's happened. What's next? So, well, from a DVB perspective, CI Plus groups are currently in hibernation, but that's not an obstacle. If there are new features that are needed, then please do submit these requests to the commercial module or contact the project office if you have any questions. CI Plus, CMCI Plus can be woken up again to draft new commercial requirements for TMCI Plus to integrate into the spec. So, but currently these groups are not meeting at the moment. From the LLP side of things, a new wrapper specification will be published in the near future. It will add some of the features we've discussed today, as well as operator profile version 3. That was previously part of the previous release of the 103.205, so 1.3.1. It's a relatively simple update to operator profile. Basically, it allows the CAM to get more fine-grained view on the service types supported by a host, notably the UHD, HDR service types and next generation audio. Of course, test tool updates will follow, and yeah, please check the LLP website, and of course, licensees will be informed about all of this when it goes out. Another interesting topic for future work in the short term, hopefully, is logos and port signaling. So obviously, with this new standard now being available for integration into products, there comes a question: okay, how do we inform our customers, the users of these products, about what's supported? So the logical step would be to launch a new logo. So we hope that will be possible in the near future. But it's something that maybe the CI Plus LLP will be able to think about. But anyway, that's work in progress. Nevertheless, communicating at device level that a device supports it is important. Beyond that, of course, a device should ideally support it on all of its USB inputs to avoid confusion for the user. If a device did not do that, then of course the port labeling becomes very important. It's already something that us as manufacturers have to deal with today for USB and HDMI. Things like connecting certain mechanical hard drives that need more power. So it's already something we have to deal with. But of course, it would be ideal if we did not have to add to the labeling, port labeling requirements by simply supporting it at a device level. Food for thought, and of course, this is a topic that will be say worked upon in the short term, no doubt. Talking of other activities in the short term, the German TV platform is now launching Open Roundtable for further discussion on this topic. It's not just limited to the DACH region, so please, if you're interested in CI Plus 2.0, please give them drop them an email at the email there on screen. They've already held 2 successful workshops on this topic with quite a number of participants, and the next dates are already planned in. So make a note of those if you're interested and get in touch. Another interesting bit of information, this was from an announcement made last year, but it's still ongoing work in India. The Telecom Regulatory Authority of India recommended that TVs and set-top boxes have mandatory support for the DVB-CI Plus 2.0 standard. It's great to see that ETSI standard being referenced so rapidly. Of course, we've enjoyed the use of an open interface, an open common interface in Europe for many years now, so that customers did not have to change their hardware if they changed their pay TV operator. And so the same goal is aimed for here in India. And so this is ongoing work and coordination between the various entities there. So we look forward to seeing the outcome of that in the coming months. For more information, please don't hesitate to check out the DVB website. So you have a security page and pages dedicated to each of the CI Plus standards. And of course, you have the CI Plus LLP website with many resources there for current and future CI Plus licensees. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any remaining questions.
Thank you very much again, Nicolas. Indeed, we have some few questions again. There is one about ECP, which is how confident are you that CI Plus ECP would be deemed compliant with Mobilabs?
Well, it's not a question of whether it will be. CI Plus ECP is deployed and in the field and in use. So it is an accepted form of content protection for that meets the ECP level of protection as defined by Mobilabs. Of course, this is something that is up to each operator and content provider to make a determination. So we cannot make any blanket statement that it's acceptable to everybody, because every operator and content provider needs to decide that for themselves. Like I said, it is already deployed and in use, and it's gaining quite a good level of adoption. And so, yeah, we're certainly confident that this is a good solution for ECP.
Thank you, Nicolas. We have a question related to the control, content control. So is it possible to allow CAM to use content control SAC for secure SAS messages exchange with a trusted OPAP, assuming that there's a way to enforce that OPAP is signed by the operator?
So, okay, I see, yes. Today, no, because those are 2 separate resources. So, but of course, nothing prevents, because in such a case, using the SS resource, you'd be having proprietary communication between a known application and a known implementation on the CAM. If additional security or encryption is needed, that could be managed by the OPAP and the CAM implementation. But no, today there is no way of let's say linking SAS and the CC resource. The CC resource and the SAC is a standalone standalone resource and a secure pipe, and that secure pipe can only be used by the CC resource today. But if this is a concern that the SAS resource needs additional security, then of course this is something that could be looked at.
Okay, so to be managed later on, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. And there's another question about the dependency between CI Plus 2.0 and HBBTV.
Okay, well, they're effectively completely separate standards. But of course, as CI Plus is widely supported, also HBBTV is widely supported, and operator applications is a relatively new HBBTV feature. But as I showed in the example there, the particular commercial needs of operators and the goal of CI Plus, let's say there's a good convergence between the two to offer this kind of virtual set-top box environment. So essentially two separate standards, but that can be used together to offer a compelling experience for users as an alternative to a physical set-top box.
Very good answer. Thank you. There's also a question about India. When CI Plus 2.0 would be mandated in India for TV and set-top boxes? So I'm not sure if you can answer that. I
see Jayesh has already kindly indicated, but indeed, so far this is not, we don't have a firm date for that yet, I'm afraid.
Okay, that's surprising. There's a question, so I'm not sure it will be clear for you, but will the 1.4.4 be carried in the 2.0 as well?
Yes, so no, good question, and that's actually a good point to touch upon. Any updates to 1.4 will be supported over the USB interface as well. So these things will coexist. So 1.4 features will always be supported over the 2.0 physical interface for the reasons I went into. The application, resource, and session layers are the same, effectively, apart from those few differences I went over. So if we add things like overt watermarking, then to 1.4, those can be used and leveraged over the USB interface as well. So there's no concern to be had there. When we update, we can continue updating 1.4 with new features. Those will be usable by USB cams and hosts as well.
Next question, is there a room for operator app as a virtual set-top box and the use of USB form factor? So I think the question, yeah.
Yes, I think yeah, absolutely. I think this is a very compelling product offering, and so yes, I do believe there is definitely room for this. But I'm not sure if I've understood the question. But if it's simply, whether this is something that will see traction, we certainly believe that it's a compelling kind of product and a compelling feature set that really meets a particular need in the market, which is for a better alternative to set-top box hardware.
And this is actually one of the strong use case for this. So
exactly, yes.
Next, we have which TV manufacturers have already committed the support of CI Plus 2.0 with USB?
Well, of course, I can only speak for TP Vision. So, so TP Vision through our Philips televisions have committed to it, and we are, like I said, a large part of our 2021 range will include support for both, obviously PCMCA, but also CI Plus USB out of the box. But I obviously can't speak for the manufacturers. So I would just say stay tuned, and we'll see. We obviously have industry events coming up later this year, and let's see. Yeah,
let's look at the news. Thank you. And which chipsets companies do not support CI Plus 2.0 hosts?
I'm afraid I can't comment on what chipset companies specifically do or don't support. So I think it's best to talk to the chipset companies that you'd like to use or that you're familiar with, and contact them for such details. Obviously, we are deploying it, so there are clearly some companies already supporting it, and no doubt for the reasons I stated, that it's really not a huge leap on top of 1.4 because it uses a well-known interface. No doubt, I would expect adding support for the USB interface is not something difficult at all.
Thank you, Nicolas. And indeed, it seems that people really look forward going back to trade shows and ask such questions, which indeed is the place.
Okay.
Now, I think it's the last one. When offering PCMCI and CI Plus parallel, is certification only with CI Plus 2.0 sufficient?
Okay, well, I mean, certainly I would encourage you to look into the certification details that the CI Plus LLP are offering. So the certification regime there. So if you talk to them, you'll get more details about that. But I can already say, when you certify a device as CI Plus 2.0, of course, well, if it has both interfaces, then there needs to be at the minimum checks on the other interface. So, yeah, if you go for a CI Plus 2.0 certification, then there will be a minimum amount of verification also on the PCMCA interface as well.
Thank you very much, Nicolas. And I think we have reached the end of the questions. So it was really a comprehensive presentation, and while also being also on the benefits, advantage that it offers for the industry. So I think it was not an easy exercise for you to tackle those two different aspects. So thank you very much. So it's now time to close the session. I found that the audience found this useful. Just a reminder that the video and the slides will be available on the DVB website in the past webinar sections. So thank you very much for being with us today, and I hope to see you again next week for the Native IP webinar. Bye-bye.